Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where we chat with startup founders just like you from all over the globe. Each episode, we bring you practical and actionable tips to help you escape the cubicle and begin your own startup journey. Make sure you take notes. Take it away, Kevin.
Here's a quick word from our sponsor, Podbrand Media.
As a business owner, new sales leads are essential. At Podbrand Media, we create a branded podcast for you to generate those leads by interviewing your best potential clients as subject matter experts. Not only creating great rapport, but also great content to share in your industry. Affordable and effective. Contact us today at podbrandmedia.com to learn more.
This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my special guest today is Scott Baradell. Scott, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Thanks for having me.
So some podcasters actually do the intro for their guests. I find it's easier for the guests to do it because they actually know what they're talking about and they're not reading something. So if you and I met like at a networking event, how would you introduce yourself to me?
I own a PR and marketing firm in Dallas, Texas that works for B2B tech companies. And our focus is on building trust between our clients and their audiences as a way to grow their businesses.
So as part of I think a good podcaster's repertoire is that they do research before the interviews. And the thing that just kept coming up over and over and over again when I was looking at stuff, interviews you had done, you kindly sent me a copy of your book, and I, speed read that this week. There was a common thread through that entire thing, and in so many different, so many different perspectives around trust. Tell me why. Let's just get the conversation started. Why is trust so important?
Well, obviously, not just in business, but in all aspects of our lives, we depend on trust. Gosh, just about every minute of every day, sometimes without thinking of it, we trust that the red light turns red when it's supposed to and turns green when it's supposed to. We're kind of putting trust in our infrastructure. We're putting trust in each other. And in business, it's a leap of faith. It's trust when you decide to buy a product or do business with another company. And so I've always found that fascinating. I thought that was something that was a way to look at what PR, which is my background was journalism and then PR, where PR came from, to think more broadly about the things PR can do toward this end of securing trust, right? Because just being in traditional media doesn't secure trust in the way it used to. So you have to find other ways. You have to cobble together ways to do that for your clients. And so I thought it was always ultimately all about trust. And the next step was, once you realize that as an agency, helping our clients to gain the trust of our audience is the most important thing, it's how do you do that? And that's where I kind of developed, I didn't coin the term, but developed this concept of trust signals as a way that is companies and people earn trust from each other. And if you start isolating that, you can do a better job of managing it, and I guess better managing your marketing strategies and resources.
Right. It's interesting. I mean, from a PR perspective, so often I think, PR experts are called in to do damage control sometimes after the fact. And it's hard to, I don't know who said it, whether it was Churchill or Ben Franklin or something, talking about how difficult it is to build trust and how easy it is to lose it, and how quickly you can lose it. But, you've heard the expression, you want your clients to know, like, and trust you. But it seems like looking at the things that you've written and some of the interviews you've done, it seems like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you almost seem like that trust is almost in its own category, and it almost overshadows the other two. Or maybe you consider that trust has, like and know and like built into it type thing. So how would you balance those?
Yeah, I think in branding, the word we use for like is affinity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think brand affinity and brand trust are closely related. Generally, you like a brand, like to buy from it because you trust that their products are good, or you trust that their values are aligned with yours. Increasingly, we buy based on values as much as a product, particularly in commodity businesses. So I do think they're all related, kind of similar to what you just said. I mentioned in the book that, Google has the formula that it uses when people, a lot of people don't know that Google has actually website raters, individual real people besides spiders and bots and things that go out and look at websites. And the guidelines have been something called EAT. They added another E to it, but it's always been expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness.
Mm-hmm.
And that you look for those things when you're evaluating the quality of a website. And as in my mind, trustworthiness kind of covers the other two. I'm not going to do business with you if I don't think you have the expertise to do what I need you to do, and if you haven't established enough authority, which is highly related to that. So I kind of feel the same way. I kind of feel like I can trust someone to do a good job for me and they not be my best friend. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't hire my best friend just because they're my best friend. So I think maybe to the extent it doesn't all fall into trust, I'll err on the side of choosing trust.
So in looking at your book this week, there was an interesting story you talked about. You talked about your son being a UVA fan, a University of Virginia fan, and like from birth, type thing. And he said, that when Virginia won the national championship, that these other kids became UVA fans, and he was like, these are bandwagon, fans, so to speak. But so then that led me to think, so what's the connection to UVA for people that live in Texas? And then I did a little more research and found out you're a grad, and I'm sitting here like 50 miles away from UVA's campus right now.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so it's go Who's. But the the whole idea of just the how there is part of trust is like there's some longevity to it. There's that's how you keep that's how you retain clients. That's how you build this this relationship over a long period of time. But I thought that was an interesting little anecdotes you included in your story about in the book about your son. But it is so important in today's climate, and you looked at it from so many different perspectives, like from a news perspective, from a company branding perspective, from a product perspective. I mean, how is it? It's interesting that you were talked about. It's not like we're losing trust. It's almost like a shift. Is that kind of what you were talking about?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mentioned there's one of my favorite movies is called Magnolia. I don't know if you've seen it, by P.T. Anderson, and director, and there's this very kind of sad character on it, and he had been they called him Quiz Kid. Oh my gosh, Quiz Kid Donnie Smith. Anyway, he was a child prodigy who won all this money in a game show, and then he went on to kind of lead this life where he never found love. He never, and he's in this really sad state toward the end of the movie, and he's sitting down with a police officer because he had just gotten in trouble, and he says, "I really do have love to give. I just don't know where to put it." And I think that's how a lot of people have felt, as their faith in institutions that we've always believed in. I think it just seems to happen more and more today. Who would have thought that people would be questioning institutions like the FBI, or just take your pick, all the government institutions? Some fairly large group is questioning whether they can be trusted. And you go back to the days of Walter Cronkite and 3 news channels, and there was a time when there was a kind of a consensus that was, in retrospect, you could say was largely driven by the mainstream media, and there weren't a lot of other voices to kind of fracture that sense of shared point of view. And now that we've increasingly lost faith in a lot of these sources of been authoritative sources for us in the past, we have to find new ones. We can't just say, because people basically are, studies show that people are really, really unhappy when they don't feel like they can trust anybody. So they have to go out and find the sources of information and the people they can trust. I gave the example of Donald Trump in the book also, because, if you look at mainstream media and you look at sources that are collecting, his mistruths, I think the Washington Post said he told 30,000 lies in his presidency. And yet you survey Republicans and Democrats, or just survey people, forget the parties for a minute.
Right.
Get a large group of people who are going to say he's the most dishonest president ever. And then you're going to have a large group of people who say he's the most honest president ever. So that was never the case with like a Richard Nixon.
Right.
You might have said, I like Richard Nixon, but I'm not going to say he's honest.
Exactly.
I'm not crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the things that's changed. That's a fundamental difference in how things have evolved based on, having different versions of the facts. So I think that's and I mentioned Donald Trump because I think one of the reasons he's developed such a strong following of people who think he's the most honest president ever, think he's the greatest president ever, and they show up for rallies and things. We haven't seen that for a president before. And I think it's directly related to you've got a large group of people who have lost trust in institutions. They need somewhere to put. They've got a lot of trust to give. They don't know where to put it.
Right.
And they put it in Donald Trump because he represented a reaction to all these institutions they had lost faith in. And so it just shows how the concept in the book is that trust is immutable. If we trust in something, we want to go take that trust and find something else to invest it in.
That's really an interesting concept. And as we want to kind of apply that in the business sphere, as a business owner, how do you gain trust? How do you build trust in your client base?
Well, the simplest way to build trust is to do good work for people and then let those people say good things about you. It's much easier to grow your business if other people are saying good things about you rather than you saying good things about yourself, because people tend to believe it more if other people are saying it. And so, from a practical standpoint, in terms of marketing yourself, that's why leading with your customers and clients on your website is so important. Don't go with stock art. Have real pictures of your customers, real videos, real testimonials, and don't say the client's name is Chuck B. Give it a real name. Say where they're from. Give background. People don't buy all that stuff anymore. So if you're not going to get permission from someone who's going to let you share their information in an authentic way, it's not worth it. But the more of that you have, that kind of social proof, those are trust signals, and there's not any better trust signal than that. After that, there are organizations that a lot of people believe in. Again, since everyone doesn't all look to the same things, you have to think about who your audience is. But the Better Business Bureau, having that Better Business Bureau seal on your site, having an A+ rating, those are things that, particularly for that over 40 audience, you have a local business, plumbing business, specific kinds of businesses with specific clientele. That something like a BBB seal, which isn't that hard to get, it's just a matter of paying a little money to be a member, and then you just have to respond to any complaints you might get. That's like gold. But then so many businesses don't realize the value of it and don't do it. Also, I mentioned that that's something that can be very effective for certain businesses. For other businesses, not a big deal. If you're already a well-established brand, you don't need the Better Business Bureau vouching for you. You need other things,
right?
But you don't need that.
Yeah, like Google ratings that are legitimate. They're not just these. I bought 10,000 Google reviews. From some shop overseas that just continually did these on a run. But I love the way that you define there's the PR defined, and I think I don't know if it was in your book or if I heard this on one of your podcasts, but you said PR is defined by securing trust at scale. Unpack that just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of a reaction to a couple of things. One is that the Public Relations Society of America, which has kind of been the leading PR trade association since the 40s, about 10 years ago came up with its latest definition that updated periodically, and it was that public relations is the strategic communications process of establishing mutually beneficial relationships between organizations and their publics. And I'm like, I've never had a client in 18 years or a prospect ask me to establish mutually beneficial relationships. That is not, that's nice to talk about in academia, and there are lots of syllables involved there, but it is not going to help me grow business. It's not going to tell a client what I, as a PR practitioner, can do for them. So what has the default always been? The default has been, well, get me media coverage. Mm-hmm. Like, I can get you media coverage. That's one thing that PR firms have always done. But guess what? As we talked about, the influence, reach, authoritativeness of, let's say, even getting a story in the New York Times compared to what it was 20 years ago, it's a fraction of what it was. And guess what? The staffs across the board, less at the New York Times than most daily papers, have been cut in half, right? If the papers haven't gone away altogether. So there are fewer reporters to tell that story. So you get in this vicious cycle where you're working harder to get in front of a reporter to pitch your story to finally cover you. They finally cover it. I work twice as hard, and then it gets half as much attention or less than it did before because of this fragmentation. That is the PR profession. If we allow ourselves to be defined that way, just painting itself into a corner that keeps getting smaller. So I said, well, okay, that's not a good future. Mutually beneficial relationship, nobody wants that or even knows what that is. It's not even a goal. What's a goal that makes sense, that is specific enough to be meaningful, but broad enough that there's a lot you can do besides just getting media coverage? And so I landed on securing trust at scale, because one of the things I love most about the definition is that, there's a lot of conflict in organizations between sales and marketing.
Sure.
Sales will be like, marketing, you're giving me crappy leads, and marketing will be like, why aren't you closing the leads? Well, the point I make to salespeople is, I'm sure that when you go out to make a sale, the first thing you do is you just go shake hands and start talking about the product, right? No. The most effective salespeople are the ones that go from place to place, and wherever they go, they've established these relationships over time.
Yep.
And that's what makes them valuable. Not that you can read something out of the product catalog, right? It's that you've earned the trust on a one-on-one basis of all these individuals that you can turn to and say, hey, I'm selling this product. It's the greatest thing. And that pitch is only effective because you already built that trust over time. And I tell salespeople, all marketing is trying to do for those leads to be good. So what they want the marketing people to do is just put product collateral out there, sell. And then they wonder why the leads are crappy. And I say, well, that wouldn't work for you as a salesperson. Why do you expect it to work for marketing? Marketing has to scale what you're best at and why you're a good salesperson. Scale the earning of trust.
Yeah.
And so explaining it that way, it kind of hopefully helps with the whole issue of marketing sales alignment, and it gives PR people a sense of purpose and focus beyond what I do besides get media coverage for people.
It's I think you had an interesting comment about getting in Forbes magazine, and how that it sounds so good on paper. We have a reach of 1 million, but you go back to that whole idea of fragmentation, and so it's a million over a wide range of source channels or inputs or outputs. So it's an interesting topic, and I think one that as we kind of drill down a little bit more and talk about Idea Grove, really kind of get inside your head a little bit about, as a business owner, as a CEO. When was Idea Grove first formed?
2005. So this is year 18.
And what led you to starting your own PR firm?
Well, I had been working. I was a journalist for several years. I actually worked. My first job after I graduated from UVA was in Lynchburg, Virginia, which I did a couple of years, and then I went to Dallas, and I've been in Dallas ever since. And then I went into corporate communications, corporate marketing. At a certain point, and it's really partly driven by all the changes I was seeing at that time with the emergence of social media and blogging and things like that. I wanted to be part of those things that were changing, but I was at $1.5 billion company at the time where, gosh, any kind of change was examined and re-examined and overanalyzed until you ended up not doing anything. And so that was the biggest single reason. I was just ready to be my own boss. I didn't necessarily want to be an entrepreneur. I didn't think of myself that way, or growing a company. I just wanted to have more fun doing what I was doing. And I thought I would have more fun doing it on my own because I would have more freedom to try out all the cool stuff that I was doing. And so the first thing I did was start a blog. The blog ended up picking up an audience. And before I knew it, my site was ranking well. I was getting customers. So all these things that we later apply for businesses, like by 2008, 2009, 2010 timeframe, I was on the front end of that, experiencing it myself, and the kind of I was off and running after that.
So what's been the journey from 2005 to today? Like, how much has it grown? How many people on staff now? What does it look like in 2023?
Well, we've got about 3.9 million in revenues and about 30 employees, 29 or 30 employees. The journey is, the first, as I said, we talked before, I was never the kind of person who was always the born entrepreneur who had the lemonade stands and all those things. I just like to write. I mean, I don't see myself as an entrepreneur. I see myself as a writer. That's the thing I like doing most. It's my core skill. So even as a business owner, that I thought that way. And so the first 5 years, Idea Grow was just me, and I was happy doing that. I just got to a point as I'm getting a bigger family. I have 5 kids now, and I, as a one person, the size clients I could work with was going to have an upper limit because it's just one person. So those things led me after 5 years to say, you know what, let me go ahead and take a plunge. I still remember my hands shaking as I signed that first telecom contract. You used to have to sign up for 3 years at a time, and it wasn't cheap. I was just going to go for it and started. I always try to be. I was always a pay-as-you-go person. Never took out loans or things like that. Eventually, took out a line of credit, which I try not to use, but I've just kind of grown it incrementally from there. So it's been fun. It's been a journey, that's for sure.
Have you made it to have your own suite in Cowboy Stadium yet? Is that where we are?
No, I've actually gone backwards on all that stuff. Since I worked for some big companies that had perks like that, they just threw around everybody. I worked for a company that used to be a part owner of the Dallas Mavericks, so I have floor seats sometimes. And I'm a huge basketball fan, so I'm owner of a business. But good luck. We like to have a nice holiday party and a couple nice things, but we're working on a much smaller scale now, but that's okay. I'm glad I got to experience those things.
So the podcast is called Rising Tide Startups, and you said something really interesting just a second ago that I kind of want to unpack a little bit, because I think it is true of a lot of our guests, where you said, I'm almost like an accidental entrepreneur. I'm a writer. I want to be a writer. That's what I love to do. But out of necessity, I had to, learn how to lead a company as well. So in that journey, what are 2 or 3 just really key lessons that you think you've learned that would be useful to people that are further behind you in the journey, that, are just, a couple of just foundational principles that you wish you would have known, starting out, that would have really been game changers for you?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think the lessons are going to be different based on what that person needs or what their background is. So for me, and this would apply to maybe some of your audience, but not others, I was always that achiever type who straight A's, and I was a very serious history student, and I was very much about, getting fairly graded for my work and so forth, and everything was about. And then when I went into journalism, where I wanted my byline on the story, you know what I mean, all this kind of thing where it was about any rewards I got would be attached directly to how good I was at something. I tied everything so much to competence. So when I started hiring people, I really focused on trying to figure out their competence level. If it's a writer, because I hired some senior writers to start out, because that's something I needed to scale from the start. Just looking at their their work and professional credentials and things like that. And I continued to do that for quite a while. But then I would wonder why I had culture issues. And it was because I didn't give enough emphasis to making sure the people would all be a fit with each other. And so we're way better at that now than we've ever been. We added something called Culture Index, which is a great tool for seeing where people are coming from, to see if it is a good fit with your existing culture. We develop values that we use in the hiring process, in the evaluation process, and promotions and raises and stuff. And what's happened just from doing that is we've got a much more harmonious group of people that together are much more productive. And I would say, gosh, I wish I had done that from the beginning, because I was so focused on making sure I could hire the most talented person for what I could spend at every position. I didn't think enough about, what if they all hate each other? Or what if you got someone who is really good, but all they care about is themselves? Coming from my background, that was a blind spot I had. Someone coming from another background might be just the opposite.
I think that has a lot broader application than I think you're giving it credit for, because I think that's so important. But before you kind of go into maybe item number 2, can I ask you a quick follow-up about that very thing? I mean, how do you kind of suss out, use a really kind of a hackneyed term, how do you suss out if the applicant is just trying to tell you, oh yeah, I fit all those culture values, I believe in all those, versus reality? How do you kind of weed through the interview, persona?
We really tried to get at questions where people are kind of put in a position, not to put it on the spot per se, but put in the position where they have to give real life examples of things.
Good.
And as you dig into, and maybe you ask a couple follow-up questions, so the old thing about, I never tell a lie, because I never have to remember what I said.
Exactly.
If you're not coming in and being honest about it, if you take enough interest to ask detailed questions to kind of probe those things, you can usually tell. And then it might be little subtle things that come out in the references and stuff too. But frankly, we're very straightforward about, hey, if we want what's best for you, and what's best for us, and if you're more like this than that, that's fine. You just might not be happy here.
Yeah.
So we try to make it like also from the standpoint of people's egos, it's not you, it's me,
I love that. That is such an interesting, I mean, I've done 300 plus, interviews, and I don't think that anybody's ever mentioned that specific thing. So what's maybe one other thing that you think would be helpful?
Well, you're mentioning like people that are maybe earlier in their careers and stuff. I remember something that stuck with me since I was in my mid-20s, that so I'll share it because it stayed with me for so long, was this was when I was still in journalism, about a year away from transitioning into marketing. And I had a friend who was this calming presence in my life, who I was just like, I'd always been, this high achiever, right? Great grades, all those things, right? And then I come out and I felt like my journalism career just kind of stalled, and I felt like, but I'm doing all these things right, but I failed here or whatever. And what she said to me was, life is more forgiving than that. In other words, you don't have to accomplish it all by 26. And also, like, this whole thing, a lot of times you'll have these hustle harder types talk about, oh, it's okay, you fail because you use that failure and get right to your next one and blah, blah. How about it's okay to fail and then take a year off and backpack across Europe? It's okay to fail and take some time to go see if you want to be a chef instead. Those things are okay too. Life is long, so try to make it, try to take advantage of the journey by not seeing it as some continuation of school where you've just got to get the best grade and you're competing against everyone in your class, and ultimately no one's looking at you as hard as you're looking at yourself. And you just need to enjoy your life, and whatever pace and whatever choices you make, as long as they're your choices, they're going to be the right ones. That's what I didn't get at that time. I'm really glad my friend told me that, because it stayed with me. I don't know that it completely sank in until later even, but it was really good advice for me.
Hey, it's a journey. I mean, life's a marathon, not a sprint, right? So those are really good. Kind of that in that section of our chat that we call the mentor moment. Just where you can really speak into those, like I said, are a little further behind you in the journey. But we talked about a lot of things. Scott, is there anything that we have that I haven't asked you about that you think would be really helpful for our audience to hear as we kind of wrap up today?
No, I think it's been a great conversation. It's been fun to chat, and to hopefully there's some value in it for someone who listens. But I've enjoyed the conversation.
Well, we will certainly make sure that your book is in the show notes, and I encourage our listeners to go grab a copy, because it really is it's not that it doesn't have academia, behind it, but it doesn't read like an academic book. It really is a good read, and has just so much in the contained in the pages. But I'm going to do something a little different today. Normally, I ask the guest to kind of give us a closing thought, but I'm going to use something that you put in your book to kind of close us out today, that I thought was so good. And you said, people demand places to put their trust. Supply them that place, and you've got a customer for life. What a way to wrap up our time today. And Scott, I just want to thank you for taking time and really just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Have a great weekend.
You too. Take care.
We hope you heard some great takeaways. Make sure you follow up with our guests today and show them the support they deserve. As always, thank you for listening and playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide.